It seems like every supplement company now has an electrolyte. And from a business standpoint, this makes a lot of sense because they're pumping out cheap powders with random ratios of electrolytes and calling it a hydration supplement. This is where Protekt's different because their hydration supplement is more convenient, absorbs faster, and mimics the exact ratio of electrolytes lost in sweat. So it gets the job done with precision and not guesswork. So while other supplement companies are adding electrolytes to make quick and easy money, Protekt has decided to put their full focus into it. And I'm not going to lie, the fact that they're a 100% American-made, veteran-owned company also adds a lot of value. So if you want a world-class hydration supplement from a company who specializes in it, go to protekt.com/truth. I'm a dietitian and work with some of the best athletes in the world. These people trust me with their health and performance, and it's up to me to make sure that they're taking advantage of everything they can to be at their best. And I feel the same way when it comes to the general population because dads, moms, students, physical laborers, and busy professionals all need to do everything they can to perform at their best every single day. That's why I tell everyone I can that a great day starts with a good night's sleep. And when it comes to the best sleep, Tuft and Needle has your back. Quite literally. Their state-of-the-art mattresses are designed with adaptive foam to give you the perfect balance of support and comfort, whether you're recovering from a tough workout or just need a restful night to tackle the day ahead. They're so confident you'll love their mattresses that they offer a 100-night sleep trial. So if you're ready to upgrade your sleep, visit tuftandneedle.com and finally wake up feeling energized and ready for the day ahead. Today's guest is Jim LaValle, a clinical pharmacist, board-certified clinical nutritionist, and one of the leading voices in integrative and precision health. With over 4 decades of experience, Jim's worked with everyone from high-level professional athletes and executives to everyday people, helping them understand how things like metabolism and inflammation impact their daily lives. He's the author of many books, including Cracking the Metabolic Code, and he's known for his ability of bridging the gap between cutting-edge science and real-world practical strategies. Jim is a go-to expert for professional sports organizations and has a unique talent for simplifying complex health topics into tools that people can actually use. I'm really excited to dig into his perspective on optimizing health, recovery, and performance. All right, so we have Jim LaValle, and you are a clinical pharmacist and a board-certified clinical nutritionist, which is a lot by itself, but I think where you're going to provide the most benefit to listeners, you work with high performers specializing in natural products, lifestyle modification, peptides, and drug nutrient depletion, which is going to be a new term for almost anyone. And the way I've gotten to know you is I say you work from the metabolism out. You start there and move from there. So hopefully I gave a pretty good introduction. Talk a little bit more about what you do and go from there.
Oh, sure. I mean, I've spent 40 years now, I turned 65 this year. So I spent 40 years really in this space called precision health. So very early on, I had great mentors that said, you know what, it all starts within the cell. If that cell's polluted, if your mitochondria aren't working, if you're not getting nutrients into the cell, it's pretty hard to get somebody reversing the issues that they have. And those issues could be everything from, high performing athletes, tactical folks that I work with, but I work with people every day, like business executives that are like tired by midday, like 1 o'clock, they're going, oh my God, how am I going to make this decision? Right. And then, people struggling with healthcare problems, everything from, autoimmunity to, you know, cancer to colitis. Right. So, for me, it's all about where is a person at? Where am I at today? What do I need to do to change about that in an ordered environment? Because, a lot of times what ends up happening is people hear about peptides, like, oh man, I'm going to go on all these peps. And they haven't fixed their nutrition status issues, which how are your cells going to work to make the peps have an effect? Right. And, I'll mention, I'm, the co-chair for the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine. I teach thousands of doctors every year how to tear people's chemistry apart. And then I chair the International Peptide Society. I've written a couple books there too. So I got 26 books out. So I've been in this a minute. And, I think what I continue to be is passionate about how can someone get the most out of their health? Like, how do you really thrive and have vitality at every stage in life? Right. So, I think that's where it really, hits home for me. So I've always taken the approach of, I think I'm going to try and uncover every factor or facet of why someone is breaking down, and that can be, I know we talked previously, I just did the Arctic Challenge, right? The Arctic Challenge was four people rowing the Arctic Ocean, 1,000 kilometers in freezing cold. One Special Forces guy retired, Jimmy Graham from the, former New Orleans Saints, going to be a Hall of Famer, and then two U.S. Olympic rowing members. And I had to put their chemistry together so that they didn't break down. Think about only sleeping an hour and a half, getting up, rowing, sleep an hour and a half, getting up, rowing. And they did that in 10 days, which broke the record by 4 days.
Holy smokes.
And the biggest thing was, yeah, man, it's crazy, right? But the biggest thing was they didn't lose a lot of weight. They didn't get catabolic and they recovered very quickly. Like Jimmy Graham was back doing endurance bike racing the next week, right? So, it's all about preparation. And so those are very extreme conditions. But I also look at executives that are flying 3, 4 times a week. They're in meetings. They're the psychogenic stress that they get in many ways is every bit as difficult or more difficult on your chemistry, right? So that's kind of, the way I look at it. It doesn't matter what your goal is. What are the obstacles in the way to restoring your metabolism?
Yeah, and I think that's the one thing people don't understand. Like everyone's looking for the biohack. And I hate the term honestly because most people don't understand what it means. And when someone says, I'm trying to biohack, I'm like, well, you're trying to not work is what you're trying to do. But to me, the true biohack is metabolism. Like if you're looking at one thing that you can go in there and start making some lifestyle changes or supplemental changes, adaptogen changes, things we can do to actually influence, to move the needle, to make a difference, it's going to be somewhere in your metabolic health. And, when we're talking about metabolic health, we're looking at, how well your body produces, uses, and regulates energy. And what this looks like is, stable blood sugar, healthy blood levels, blood lipids, normal blood pressure. I'm trying to think of all the different things.
Oh,
The no
there's so many.
excess
Cortisol, right?
adiposity, so
Yeah.
many, and a lot of people they're looking for things. What can I take? I'm like, well, we can fix these things with lifestyle modification first, and then let's start trying to move the needle to the nth degree. Because right now we can move it yards. We're looking at yardage. We can move here,
Yeah,
and
man. We're like brothers from another mother, man. And it's the same thing I talk about all the time. It's like there's no way you're going to get past the fact that you're going to have to learn how to eat better and you're going to have to learn what foods are right for you and fit the lifestyle you have. Like, why are you worrying about a pre-workout, an intra-workout, post-workout drink when you're training for 30 minutes?
yes,
Yeah, it's that kind of stuff. And then the other piece, to it obviously is, you know, working out. You got to, diet's got to be right, and you got to move. You have to move. There's no way getting around movement, and so that starts foundationally there. The big thing that I really have found over the years that most people overlook, because high achievers, like if you're an executive and you're pushing hard or you're just somebody that's looking for that higher threshold of productivity, right? You've got to manage your cortisol, meaning that, what happens is the more you are able to take on that white tiger, you're driven, right? You're what I call a Spartan. Like Spartans are people that, I'm a Spartan. I'm going to admit it. Okay. It's a problem. Uh, but, if I came to you, Tyler, and said, Tyler, I want you to work me up, man. And you said to me, Jim, I'm going to do some extra stuff on you. I'm going to give you 5 things to change. The first thing I'm going to come back at you with is 5. I want 10, dude. Why can't I can handle 10 all day long, right? And and so that's that person that drives hard and doesn't really recognize that, hey, my sleep's eroding. I'm starting to crave a little bit midday. I'm not quite as cognitively sharp. And a lot of it has to do with that extended sympathetic drive, right? You get into that fight or flight response chronically. And when you flatten your cortisol curve, meaning that your cortisol is supposed to go up high in the morning, you're supposed to be really productive. Then it goes down at noon, dips again at 5. It's supposed to go down to zero at bedtime, and then you trigger delta sleep inducing peptide and melatonin to put you into deep sleep for repair. When you just keep driving that adrenaline, I mean, you're 333% more at risk for cardiometabolic issues. So the lipids go bad, the glucose goes bad, right? You start making bad actor lipids. You start having more, same tendency, 333% more likely neurodegenerative disorders and then mood disorders. And so that's why you see these executives that one day all of a sudden they wake up and they go, oh crap, I developed an adult attention deficit.
Mhm.
No, you just tanked your reserve of neurotransmitters because you've been pushing too hard, you know? So anyway, for me, one of the big things people got to get that understanding of is, am I fooling myself by driving those 16-hour days and not understanding how I need to recover and how I need to repair? That's number one on my list because it affects so much.
Yeah. Can we go back to that adult ADD simply because ADD has become kind of a calling card? People brag, "Oh, I have ADD." I'm like, I've met people before. I'm like, you don't have ADD. You just don't value what people are saying. You're not listening. But I do think it's a thing. You're seeing more and more people like I self-diagnosed into adulthood, and it makes sense. So talk a little bit about what adult ADD
Sure.
is, because people are probably going to hear that and say, I have that. And I want you to talk
Yeah.
about it and talk about what it really is, what's causing it, and what they can do to no longer have that, or at least have the real version of it.
Yeah. Sure. Well, I mean, obviously, it's like if you went all through school and you had great grades and everything was great and you could cognitively, process, and then all of a sudden you're age 29, 32, and hey, I'm not focusing good. I can't stay on task. I'm losing my motivation. I'm not picking up what you're putting down, right? You know, that's that lack of cognitive coherence. Like I'm losing my ability to focus. Now, if you, and it's not an Adderall deficiency, man. It just flat out isn't. I mean, that's the big thing people fall into is they get on that something like Adderall and they go, "This is amazing," for a couple of years. And then when the Adderall dose wears off, they go, "Man, I just got to sit on my couch because I can't really think after the Adderall wears off." And then the next step is man, I need to get up put on an antidepressant because now my mood's flat. So why is that happening? So there's a couple things. One, there's a lot of evidence that you get neuroinflammation from your gut. You got a nervous system that connects the gut to the brain. So when you're not eating, you're not eating foods that are nutrient dense, not calorie rich. So you're not, focusing on a diet that's protecting the microbiome, getting adequate fiber. Maybe you've got a rich history of antibiotics when you were a kid, and it messed up your microbiome. And maybe you have to clean up the bad bugs, get rid of them, and get the good bugs back in, right? But it is clear that when the microbiome is disrupted, you get inflammatory signals to the brain, and that just absolutely happens. It triggers the microglia of the brain, and the microglia of the brain start to trigger oxidative stress, basically throwing out a bunch of damaging particles that now are affecting your neurons. It's damaging your neurons. Now, the other piece to it is as you're pumping out that cortisol, right? You're pumping out the cortisol. Cortisol also causes a problem in that you don't rebud new neurons. So it blocks your stem cells from expressing new neurons and creating what's called neuroplasticity, creating new networks of neurons that are able to reconnect and keep you thinking. So you're blocking it. And at the same time you're blocking it, you're going to that pool of neurochemicals responsible for focus: dopamine, adrenaline, noradrenaline, phenylethylamine, and you're just draining that pool. So when you drain the pool of your focusing neurochemicals, what's going to happen? You're not going to focus. So, so the causality is typically, it could be some other things like insulin resistance could also do it, right? Because you get a lot of lipopolysaccharide developed from the gut in that case, crosses the blood-brain barrier, does the same thing, triggers that. So that's where you get into the causality. You've drained the pool of your neurochemicals. as an adult, right? Pushing hard. What are you going to do about it? Now that's a whole different story, because if you want to do it the right way, it means, how am I going to quiet the neuroinflammation, right? So how do I calm that? How do I look at gut? And then how do I restore the pool of neurotransmitters that I need to restore in order to be able to start thinking clearly again? So that's kind of the general piece, and now we can kind of get into. I know you'll have I know you'll have something to add to that, or at least ask me a question on. But then we can get into some specifics on what exactly could you take or do, or what strategies do you use?
If you know me, you know that I believe venison is the best quality protein on earth because it's higher in protein, lower in fat, and more nutrient dense than other sources of protein. But you may not know that you don't have to be a hunter to have the best source of venison delivered right to your door. I'm talking about venison from Maui Nui Venison in Hawaii. Steaks, ground, ribs, snack sticks. It's all naturally organic, and each purchase helps restore Hawaii's beautiful ecosystem. And right now, they're having their biggest sale ever, where you'll get a free box of 12 snack sticks with your first purchase of $79 or more. All you have to do is go to mauinuivenison.com/truth. That's MAUINUI venison.com/truth, and start eating the best quality source of protein available. Yeah, and I think it's interesting, not ultra surprising for people like us, but how it is all interconnected. I I work like you. I work with a lot of high performers, business tycoons, NFL,
Yeah,
superstars,
yeah,
Super Bowl champions, UFC champions, and it's interesting because the ones that have everything dialed in, they're already, and they're still working with people like us because, again, like if you really want to perform at the highest level, you're looking to move the needle in a way that is almost unrecognizable to the average person, but to you, it makes a difference. And these people are ticking every box, and they don't really have these same problems. And I can think of one of my guys, for instance, who's a former NFL athlete and now entrepreneur. He is easily the busiest person I have ever met in my life. Everything is accounted for. Like, he is constantly doing something, and he doesn't struggle with this. Focus is never an issue. Like,
right.
he goes to bed at night, he sleeps great, he wakes up. He don't have any of these because he's checking all the other boxes. He's prioritizing the right kind of sleep. He's prioritizing the proper nutrition. Like, we're going in there and fine tuning the micronutrients and gut health, and we're doing all of these other things. And this guy's and has a family. Like, he's busier. He has every excuse to just be metabolically screwed, and he's not, because he's
Yeah.
checking all the lifestyle boxes. So he don't need all these things.
Yeah, that's exactly it, man. I mean, I'll tell you what, and the big one you mentioned is sleep. And a lot of people don't realize that insomnia is a disorder of hyperarousal, meaning that your brain takes on too much juice during the day, and then when you go to night, your brain's going, "Hey, man, there's another white tiger coming. You can't go into deep sleep. What are you talking about?" Right? And so
Yeah.
one of the big mistakes people make when they have sleep problems is they take something at bedtime only.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I'm going to take melatonin. No, I'm not going to take melatonin. I'm going to take mag-threonate. No, I'm not. I'm going to take both. And I'm going to add kava. And I'm going to add ashwagandha. And I'm going to add theanine. You can do all that, and it might work. But the real solution is, how do you manage that stress response during the day so that you maintain what's called brain coherence, right? There's a balance between your sympathetic nervous system and your parasympathetic nervous system, which is the brake. It's called the vagal brake, that allows your body to go, oh, okay, it wasn't a white tiger. It was a text that I got that I didn't
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
right? Or, I got too many emails today, or gee, this project's overdue. That's not fight or flight. That's not what it was intended for. We got a primitive nervous system in a modern world. And so I find I have to get people to work on, hey, calming down, like simple things like box breathing for, a few minutes, a couple or three times a day, to unload that sympathetic drive that pushes your diaphragm up. And that part's really important. And then, of course, there's the nutrient strategies that are directly related to the brain and managing cortisol.
Can we talk about box breathing? Because again, this is something most people aren't probably familiar with. And I'll be
Sure.
honest, like I know the importance of things like meditation. I know all this, bro. I'm not going to meditate, but box breathing is something. And honestly, I've not even really talked about it. Box breathing is something that I use regularly, and I have for a couple of years
Yeah.
now. When I know I
Yeah.
need to relax, and it is shockingly effective. It is. I'll call it the high performers meditation because you can do it pretty much anywhere. My favorite
Yeah.
place to do it's in the woods in a tree stand. But when I'm in the woods and in a tree stand, I don't really feel that stress anyway. But talk a little bit
Right.
about box breathing, how you do it,
Sure.
the time frame of this, and if you could, the science behind why this specific method helps.
Oh, yeah. This is great because, I give this out to every person that I work with. Like, you can't escape talking to me and not hear about it
Yeah.
because it's because it's the quick reset. I'm not going to sit there and meditate for 30 minutes. It's not going to happen.
No.
It's not, and so box breathing is real simple. You inhale on a 4 count, you hold a 4 count, you exhale on a 4 count. And on the exhale, you think about the stress that you've held on to and how you're releasing it. Like I always envision almost like a spigot. I turn that spigot and it's just draining out of me. And then I hold for a 4 count. You can do that for as little as 3 to 4 minutes, and it will totally reset your nervous system.
And this is through the diaphragm.
And this is
Like,
yeah, that's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about that. So ideally, the times you do it is, hey, I'm gonna do it at noon at lunch. Before lunch, I'm gonna hit it because I'm gonna get rid of the morning. And then at the end of the workday, you're gonna hit it. You're gonna do it again. Hey, I'm gonna unload what I took on from noon or lunch to end of workday. And then I like people doing it at bedtime. So what it's basically doing when you box breathe is you're inducing your parasympathetic tone or your vagus nerve to allow the diaphragm to actually move and drop. So it's allowing the lungs to fill up more, which sends a signal to your nervous system that you're not in fight or flight anymore. And I mean, I have people that get euphoric. I've had people cry the first time they did it. They literally released so much tension. And so the real science of box breathing is quite simple. It takes you out of a shallow breath, a high acidotic breath, right? Because you're just not enough oxygen. And it drops that diaphragm and allows that nervous system to restore that vagal tone. We all hear about heart rate variability, right?
yeah,
Well, what's heart rate variability dependent on? Do you have vagal tone or not?
yeah.
Is your brain, is the autonomic nervous system working the way it's supposed to or not? And I'll tell you where I found, when I really got into this was probably 15 years ago. We were working with Corvette race team, and they came to us and they said, "We're not winning Le Mans." Yeah, I was like, "Okay, what do you want to what do you want me to do? Let me give you some suggestions. Build a better car, uh, hire different drivers, right? You're not winning."
Yeah.
And they were like, "No, we got great drivers, we got great cars, but we're not, something's wrong." So we worked them up and obviously cleaned up their base chemistry. But one of the big things we did was we had them swallow a telemetry pill. And when they were going around the track, we noticed their core body temperature going up. And when your core body temperature goes up, your brain coherence goes down. So, like, you can think of it, if it's a hockey player, they think they're going to get to that puck and put it in the right spot, but they start missing. Or somebody catching a pass. Oh, wow. I normally catch that pass all the time. I missed it. Right. So what we did was we developed a nasal spray for them that quieted their sympathetic tone. And we had them do that before they got in the car. Lo and behold, core body temperature stayed good, reaction time stayed good. They went and won Le Mans. Kind of neat.
Wow.
Um, yeah, it was kind of interesting, right? So the way I address it is gonna have to breathe. You're gonna have to learn how to manage that stress a little better when something's coming at you. At some point you got to take an active step into that. And then the other piece is, well, if you're in a high demand situation, well, what could you take to improve that? we developed that nasal spray. It was called synapsin. And synapsin is a ginsenoside complex that quiet. I did research initially on attention deficit and spectrum disorders and found out, wait a second, people with insulin resistance have microglial cells activated. People want to get their head hit. People that train really hard, they overtrain, right? They overtrain and they change their, their nervous system output. And I find executives are great at that because they're already working 12-hour days and they want to work out to blow off the stress. Well, you're already cranking, right?
Yeah.
So now we've got that where we've developed a way to do that orally, which in the past we weren't able to do. So that's one of our big go-tos is using some synapsin to kind of quiet the microglial cells. It increases focus and increases concentration without being a stimulant, because stimulants are the wrong way to go. Like if stimulants trigger more sympathetic stress. So that the old theory of, hey, I'll just drink one more monster.
Good luck.
Just get another monster. That isn't it.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's the big thing about why box breathing is so important, is it really aligns that nervous system.
Yeah, and the reason I like it, like I said, it can be done anywhere. It can be done in the car. I've
Oh
even had
yeah,
people kind of practice input something that's calming to them into that box. So for me personally, it's the draw and the release of an arrow. That's in my mind. That's what I'm thinking of it is finding the target, holding,
oh yeah.
releasing, holding, let loose. Like I love traditional archery, so shooting that to me that's calming anyway. So I pair that with that. And again, I
That's
didn't even
great, man.
yeah, and it's something that I do find people underestimate. And it's weird when you really think about it because what happens if we don't breathe? We die. You have to breathe. It's literally the thing that keeps you alive.
Yeah,
So how do
pretty
we
important.
yeah, pretty awesome. Pretty amazing how that works. So how crazy is it that we don't think about the fact that not only is breathing connected with our ability to live, but the quality of breathing and the aspects of how we breathe is correlated to how we live, how our health comes through that. So again, it should be an obvious thing. Like we have to breathe
Right.
to live, but we don't think about the fact that the quality of it affects our quality of life. And it's huge. Then
Oh, I
there's
mean,
other things. Go ahead.
yeah, no, you're spot on
As I
about
was saying,
that.
it goes even the things like sleep. If you don't sleep, you die. Like we know if you don't eat, you die. So what do we do? Like we really focus on eating as much, but like when we literally take these things back to the primal reasons, we have to sleep to die. So the way we sleep will, or we have to sleep to live. So the way we sleep will affect the quality of our life. We have to eat to live. So the quality of what we eat will affect our quality of life. We have to breathe. We have to drink. Like these things that are just the base level, do this or die, we tend to not think about, well, the quality at which you do this will affect the quality at which you live.
Yeah, and of course, a single peptide that you pick out that's hot on the biohack trail is going to fix it all.
Yeah, that's what everyone
Yeah,
hopes. Now,
yeah,
I took,
yeah. And it's interesting that when we talk about this, I always bring this up. When I went through the pharmacy school I went through, still had pharmacognosy classes, so the study of plant medicine. We were founded by the Lloyd brothers, which was like the leading botanical extractors of the early 1900s. And people don't realize, the most valued herb in every culture since medicine was recorded, the number one in every culture, adaptogens, the herbs that helped you cope with stress. But today, what we do, our adaptogens are Prozac and Adderall. We wait till we crash and burn, and then we got to use some artificial stilts to try to get us somewhat functional. But it never really matches the fact that you don't get your resiliency, right? What you described on drawing that bow, that's what I talked to people. It was so good, man. I'm just telling you, I love that because I talk to people about that all the time. Like, you should be living your life. Like when you had the perfect golf swing and it was just there, or you saw like a lotus flower open up and bloom and you were just there. We should be in that moment, feeling good and resilient. And every things that take you away from that, I'm not sleeping, I'm not eating right, I'm not breathing, I'm not hydrating, you know, and those are the things that, as you said, everybody forgets to do. And, culturally, we have not done a good job of teaching people how to prevent the negative impact of stress. Hence, nobody's taking adaptogens. I mean, our adaptogens, like I said, Adderall, Prozac. Oh yeah, I forgot liquor. I mean,
Yeah.
lots of liquor stores. Not a lot. I don't see any adaptogen shops when I drive home. I see a lot of liquor stores and a lot of bakeries.
Yeah.
You know, so
So so talk a little bit about adaptogens. Let people know what these are,
sure.
what some of them are specifically that you think people could easily start to incorporate, and what they can expect to feel, and how they can see that change their life through if they start to use those.
Yeah, so I categorize there's a couple areas. If you're already feeling nervous, you're already feeling anxious, you're already craving food, you're already having trouble sleeping, I look at using things like Relora, which is like a magnolia and philodendron extract. It dampens cortisol response, decreases food patterns that are related to comfort food eating, right? It's like, you open up a big bag of family-sized chips, and before you know it, you're three-quarters of the way through it. you know, or you get a regular size and you're licking your finger to get the remaining salt out of the bottom of the bag for your adrenal glands, right? Things like Relora and theanine. Theanine's great for perseverators that are just anxious. That helps you to kind of reclaim yourself a little bit. And then you get into the adaptogens. So one of my favorite is rhodiola. I love rhodiola because rhodiola, came out came out of Russia and European medicine. Rhodiola is interesting because they've shown that it improves cognition. But the interesting thing is that it lowers your sympathetic drive. So your what's called your peripheral adrenergic nervous system, the adrenaline adrenergic, it helps to squelch that. So when you take an adaptogen, what it's doing, so whether it's rhodiola or ginseng, it's particularly Manchurian ginseng, because Siberian ginseng is really not ginseng. Ashwagandha is another one, Shazandra, right? There's several of these plants. What it's really doing is helping you to stay out of what's called allostatic load. So, allostasis is your body's ability to take on stress, and your brain tells the rest of the body, "Hey, what do I got to do? How do I manage this situation?" Right? Allostatic load occurs when the stress becomes either so consistent or it's acute enough that your brain switches. So it's almost like a circuit board, right? The circuit blows,
Yeah.
and no matter how many times you go to the light to turn it on, it ain't going to work. That's because you got to go back to the circuit board. So what adaptogens do is they help to balance the connection between the brain and the rest of your body in response to stress. Because when you go into allostatic load, what that means is your brain either over responds. So now you're agitated really quick, right? You over respond to things, or it changes its response. So now instead of making testosterone, for example, you've been under stress for a while, that you've lowered your testosterone because you stopped making gonadotropin releasing hormone. So now your test is down. So what's the answer to that in our culture? Hey man, here's the test clinic you drive through.
Yeah.
Instead of understanding that these processes are going on. So adaptogens basically cool down the circuitry of excess fight or flight neurochemistry, puts the brake on, and starts to establish boundaries and protection for your brain to communicate with the rest of the body.
Eating high quality, delicious meals when you don't have a kitchen available is virtually impossible. But Essential Provisions has the solution. Their shelf stable meals go beyond organic and are made without any of the sketchy ingredients we all need to avoid. And somehow they've done so while also being some of the best tasting food you will ever eat. So whether you're on the road, in the woods, or on the trails, Essential Provisions has you covered with food that will support your performance, health, and your taste buds. Use the link in the show notes to save 10% now. Half-Face Blades makes 100% American-made knives for the world's best military operators, hunters, and chefs. People who need knives to make a living or stay alive. That's why I trust them with my own everyday carry knife. So if things like buying American and high performance matter to you, head over to halffaceblades.com and throw away your cheap gas station knives. Interesting. And the thing is, everyone experiences some fight or flight.
Oh,
It's a primal pattern that literally was there to keep us alive.
yeah,
Yeah, again,
right
white
on.
tiger, saber tooth comes up, like we're ready to go. Like we have to make a decision right then and there. But
Right.
we're not designed to stay in that. We're supposed to get there, deal with it quickly as possible, and then threats eliminated. Now I'm just going to chill. We don't have that anymore because life in itself is the white tiger. It is the saber tooth. We're constantly stressed. We're constantly moving through these things, from parenthood to business. We're constantly thrown into those fight or flight scenarios, and we're not equipped with. And in fact, we're discouraged in life a lot of times in society. We're discouraged from finding ways to activate the parasympathetic and
Yes.
learning how to chill out. Or, like I said, everyone, the band-aid we put on that bullet wound is like, okay, let's just meditate. Like, yeah, cool, bro. Who's gonna take my kids out of the house for an hour so I can meditate? It's not a realistic thing. So I think it's important
100%.
we're always looking at ways that we can chill this sympathetic nervous system. We can relax, or we can learn how to deal with it and move on from it and incorporate that into our day-to-day life.
Yeah, and unfortunately, what a lot of people do is eat their way out of it or drink their way out of it, right? They're going to have that cocktail at night. Hey, I got to have that cocktail when I get home from work, man. Give me that martini, or like I'm not going to be a good dad, right? It's
Yeah.
like I need that. And 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 look, I'm not saying alcohol. Hey, look, if you have occasional drink here and there, that's great. But the one thing we know is don't use that as your way to stabilize yourself, right? So, so it's interesting you bring this up because, see, I think this is a problem that's happening very early on. If you haven't written your first symphony, published your first book, and speak three languages by the time you're out of kindergarten, it was so. And I'll tell you what, my son's 26. I remember when he was 4 years old, and we were looking for like a little date because we lived on a lane. There weren't many kids. I wanted him in like a little daytime thing, a couple of days a week, get some social interaction. So I started interviewing people. And I go into this one place, and she said, "Well, yeah, we got a bunch of high achieving families in the neighborhood." She opens up the door, and there's this room that's a Chinese tea ceremony room. And she said, "All of our kids learn how to do a Japanese tea ceremony." And I looked at her and I said, "Y'all just have like finger paint? Can my kid just finger paint and
Is
be
there a ball?
creative and think out of the box a little bit here? Like I'm not worried about making him a high producer at 4 years of age." And that just goes on more and more, right? You think of the pressure on youth athletics now. I mean, you got kids, and we think kids are little adults, so they're going to a pre-workout. They work out
Yeah.
with their private coach before they go to their workout, and then they're expected to go home and study. And hey, you're not going to get quite enough sleep, but as long as you get those good grades, kid, right? And so we're kind of instilling that process into, I think, our society, and it's been going on for a long time, right? And so now it's like you said, man, you get home at night, you flip on every light in the house so your eyes think it's morning again, so you blow off that diurnal pattern that you're supposed to have, right? You have this thing called the suprachiasmatic nucleus in your brain. It's the master clock, and it wakes up in the morning with sunlight into the eyeballs, and darkness is supposed to say different set of hormones you're supposed to release now. But we turn on the TV. I gotta have that 85-inch TV in my bedroom. I'm gonna be looking at not my single phone, but my two phones before I go to bed. Make sure I don't miss anything. And I know that sounds harsh, but it's why we have a lot of issues that I think are, kind of inherent. We're seeing all the depression and anxiety and, all kinds of disorders popping up at earlier and earlier ages. And so I think it's just critical that people understand that, your metabolism, like your mitochondrial health, the bottom line is it's dependent on creating balance. So, your mitochondria, powerhouses of your cells, drive all the cellular functions in your body, getting back to that cellular piece. But what drives that is, and you said this so good, your body's supposed to take on an acute strain and then turn it off, and you go back to, hey, I'm Zen. When you don't do that, or you're constantly exposed to something, or you're constantly overtrained, lots of things start to happen. You make bad actor lipids. First thing I see, it's called metaflammation. Metabolic inflammation leads to inflammaging. It's been in the literature since 2008, right? The next thing that happens is you lose your growth hormone releasing hormone. And now all of a sudden, you're not making any growth hormone and you're getting sarcopenic, you're losing muscle mass, you're gaining fat mass. And then the next thing you start to see is disorders in iron and ferritin. Normal iron, real low ferritin, and that's bad because you need ferritin to help your thyroid hormone bind to your cells and drive your metabolism. And then because you're making all those inflammatory compounds, you start to turn your insulin receptors off. And now you start pumping out more insulin to try to get the glucose out of you, but that triggers inflammation. And then it leads to bone loss. And then where it really gets down at the end of the funnel, you kind of think almost like a funnel, what's going on. Now you start to lose neuroplasticity. I always ask people, do you feel like you're pushing a thought through jello? You know, you feel like and people look at me and they go, uh, they just, that's how they feel. And then, but the bottom of the funnel is when it hits the cells and you lose mitochondrial function. Now your cells don't have the energy to do what you're supposed to do.
Shocking. It really is, because when you think about it, it all does. I've not really thought about it to this moment, but it all does really start from the time, which I have said, parents, we mess a lot of things up with kids. It starts as kids and we mess it up. And then we let the system continue to mess it up. And I do think about even in my own, rearing of my child, which, my wife does most of the rearing, if we're honest.
We could
I
blame her then.
Yeah, we'll blame me for the bad stuff. No, trust me. No, but we look at things like, so my son, my youngest, 5 years old, when he was 1 to 2, at about the time that we're seeing other kids on social media talking very clear, he's mumbling, and we're like, is something wrong? I'm serious. Like, this is a little embarrassing, but I'm gonna admit it. We start going and seeing specialists because we're like, hey, what's wrong? Like this kid's not talking, he's just mumbling, and like we think that's the cause of all these other things. Like he was having some anger issues as a little kid. And I remember my parents, I hate to admit this, my parents were like, he's just give it time, like just chill. Like, why are you guys so freaked out about this? And I think if we didn't have social media, we wouldn't have known. And so we're just so freaked out about this, and everyone we talk to, like our parents' age, or continuously, just chill out, just relax. Like, we didn't worry about that when you all were little. And our answer tends to be now is like, well, we have all this new information. Like, we know problems
Right.
exist now that you guys didn't know. And a lot of
Oh yeah.
times that information overload is the problem. And you know what happened? All of a sudden, my kid just decided, we learned that he knew what was going on. He just didn't want to talk. And then one day he decided to talk, and he hasn't shut up since. And it just happened. It happened on his time. And we were sitting here trying to push it because, comparison is the thief of joy. And it was based off of the things that we were seeing other kids were doing. And we thought he had to be doing this. And I think about
So,
that a lot.
so is he now speaking 3 languages? Wrote his first novel and has his
Oh, gosh.
scholarship to Harvard by age 5.
No,
I mean, that's right. I mean, that I honestly, it's funny. I remember just pulling off a roadside. I was driving back from New York to Cincinnati, and it was actually a bookstore that was there, and I thought, hey, I'm gonna stop in. I need to take a break. I'm gonna look, and a book jumped out at me. And it was called The Loss of Our Childhood. And it's interesting. I'm old enough. I don't love saying back when I was a kid,
Yeah.
right? Because it makes you think like hey,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, all right, old man, which is true, but the reality was, we just played, and I had blocks, and I built things, and I drew things, and you developed your innate creativity and were allowed to imagine. Where now you just, here's your iPad, you know, watch this show, kid. This will keep you busy while I'm doing what I'm doing, instead of like really allowing those things to happen. And, like I said, then you put the burden of children around medications at younger and
Yeah.
younger ages. When I started out in practice, I never heard of eosinophilic esophagitis. Basically too many eosinophils in the esophagus for your listeners, which comes from food allergies and a broken down gut. Now there's whole hospital wings devoted to that. And it's understanding, the emperor that had no clothes, we got to stop ignoring it and really start to address, where do I start to work on my chemistry? I can tell you right now, for me, it starts with that breathing. It starts with managing stress. It starts with getting a good night's sleep, understanding what foods you're reacting to or not. Are you getting bloated every time you drink a beer? Hey, guess what? Don't drink a beer.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not that smart. I'm just saying, so I think there's that thought that, now we are in this world of everybody wants to optimize, right? And then they're looking to the same kind of allopathic, you know, you know, point in that direction, but using natural products now. Hey, this product will fix this. This product will fix that. And it does, and sometimes it does do a good job, right? I mean, you can take theanine, it's going to help you feel less stressed. But by far, you got to dig in deep, understand where you're falling short, and try to work on. And really, I honestly think most people need to find someone like yourself, or somebody comes to my clinic, and really get guidance so that they can establish a plan. Because you've seen this, Tyler. How many times have you seen somebody come to you and they got a bag of like 20 products they're taking? I'll have people bring me like a 4-page Excel spreadsheet. Here's my peps, here's my hormones, here's my supplements. Wow, it's interesting. You're doing all this stuff, but you're still insulin resistant.
Yeah.
Your glucose is still up, and your kidney function's down, and your immune system's on fire. Um, what it's that thought that there's organization, and it starts with everything we talked about at the outset of this, talk, is you got to get the basics down.
You have things that will move you yards and things that'll get you first downs. That's the way I like to think of it. And it's literally those lifestyle changes are the first downs. Like that's it. The other
Yeah,
things might get you there a yard, but if you're not making the lifestyle changes, you're just going to constantly you're getting sacked, you're regressing, you're
yeah.
not going to get the first down. And I'll say, this is a bit of a thing that rubs people the wrong way at times. But I've said this to many clients. I'm like, hey, you want to know one thing that I genuinely think you can do that's going to change a lot in your life? Like it might be overstepping. I've been told it's overstepping. And that's okay. I'm cool with that. Get
You
the
are who you
TV.
are, man.
Yeah, yeah. I try to change people's lives. Get the TV out of your bedroom. That is one piece of information that I think can help people in so many ways. Because this is the fact of the matter. You're married, you have a partner. What if you have a TV in your bedroom? That tells me a couple things. One, you're spending too much time watching TV if you're using it. I mean, if it's just there and it's
Yeah,
catching clothes, fine. You're spending too much time watching TV. You're doing so with horrible posture because you probably don't have like a nice upright chair. You're like laying in your bed watching TV. You're probably doing it
neck
at
like
night.
this.
Exactly. You're probably doing it at night when you should be off electronics before bed anyway. And the fact of the matter is, your bedroom is for two things other than getting ready. It's for sleep and sex. And if you
Yeah.
have time to watch TV, you're not doing enough of those things. And when you start
And they're
doing
real
more of,
important.
yes, when you start doing more of those things, a lot of stuff gets fixed. And that is something I have had many people get offended by me saying. I've had other people stop. Yeah, I haven't really thought about that. And they do. And guess what happens? They start having more sex. They start going to
Yeah.
sleep. That's some pretty big
Well,
first down markers right there in itself.
well, I mean, intimacy, like we all know, hugs,
Yeah.
20 seconds, change your chemistry.
Yeah.
I mean, it's that I think I don't know, man. I think that's like a golden suggestion. I'm right
Yeah.
with you. So people that can't handle that, it's like, well, guess what? Maybe you better take your phone out of your bedroom too. And and what's funny about this, we haven't mentioned yet that you have to wear Faraday glasses, do a cold plunge, do a sauna, make right. We
Yeah.
haven't, we haven't mentioned that you got to fill your life with all that stuff, right? Because that's the other thing I always find happen is people then start to do so many things trying to capture being well that they start to create stress over getting it all done,
Yeah.
getting it done right. How
Yes.
much do I do it? And look, I'm not against if you want to do a cold plunge, fine. I don't like cold water, so I don't do them. It's real simple. I don't like cold water. So, in fact, I'm kind of averse to water.
Yeah.
So, I like being on the water, not in the
No.
water. So yeah, put me on a boat. But I mean, seriously, I think all the things we're learning, they're important, but you kind of got to make them fit in a lifestyle that doesn't make you feel more hectic or more out of time, right?
Yeah.
And I think we lose that. And once again, it's like if anybody takes anything out of the our conversation today, it's hey, you ought to think about taking adaptogens on a regular basis.
Yeah.
For most people, boy, clean up your gut. I mean, I don't know many people. One of the big things that I've written 3 databases on it actually for different groups is drug-induced nutrient depletion. If you're a male and you're on a statin and you're taking a proton pump inhibitor for your GERD, your belching, your burping. It's, hey man, every time I eat those chicken wings, well, it's like, well, don't eat the chicken wings, but whatever, but it's like they get GERD. They're on a medication that's depleting really important nutrients, things like magnesium, things like calcium, protein, vitamin B12, vitamin D, and you're on a statin. And look, I'm not talking about somebody that's already got existing coronary artery disease. I'm talking about this being used really preventatively, which is, I think, a mistake. You could fix most lipid disorders through lifestyle. Um, but bottom line is that can lower your testosterone. So now you got a male that's 40 years old, their testosterone's low, they're on a proton pump inhibitor, and they have bone loss. And so these different, a lot of different drugs deplete nutrients that because it doesn't create an allergic reaction, like an adverse event, right? People don't think of the long-term consequence of being on that drug, like what nutrients are being depleted that then lead me to another condition. Now I need another med. And look, the average 40-year-old, 3 or 4 meds. The average 50-year-old, add another one or two. By the time you're 70, you could be on as many as 13 medications.
Dang, dang. Tell me this though. So we have someone, excuse me, we have someone who they're ticking all the lifestyle boxes. They're doing good, but we know that a lot of times high cholesterol is purely hereditary. Like you can't
Oh yeah.
always escape it. Typically, I'm not ultra concerned with it if everything else looks good, but the literature still is pretty clear. If your cholesterol, especially, your LDL is elevated, it's problematic. So we're ticking all these boxes, but they can't get their cholesterol down.
Right.
Would you say it's still okay for that person to be on a statin just to kind of mediate that and prevent the likelihood, say that they've seen a lot of their family pass away at a younger age, and albeit maybe their family wasn't ticking all the other boxes, should this person be on a preventative dose of statin?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think there's a lot you can do. I mean, first of all, what's your genetics? If you got a rich family history problem, are you doing an advanced lipid panel? Are you looking at the size of your lipid particles. Are your LDLs big and fluffy, or are they really tiny like BBs, and they're
DLs.
going
Yeah.
right through that inner lining of the artery? Do you have heightened oxidative stress, right? Are you insulin resistant? But fiber, red yeast rice, aged garlic extract, kyolic will lower your cholesterol an average of 7 to 10% and lower your oxidized LDL, which is really a problem, because oxidized LDL is what plaques your arteries as much as 88%. And that's in humans trials. That's like UCLA college, school of cardiology, the leading interventional cardiologist in the country doing the research. So
You-
aged garlic extract, I try to get people to if hey, if you've normalized everything, like I've done it all, man. I've checked for environmental burden. I don't have lead. I don't have any of these environmental pollutants. I don't, I've done everything. Well, then, yeah, a statin. But the other thing about statins are, interestingly, you can get by on lower doses. You don't have to do them as as high a dose. That's one thing. And the other thing that was interesting that recently came out was a study that showed that people that had cholesterols between 220 and 240 actually lived longer. So I think it depends on the type of cholesterol. Are you a plaque former, right? Like if you've got a coronary artery score, you're going to have to get to work really hard. Now, it turns out that like that aged garlic actually regressed vulnerable plaque in individuals in double-blind randomized placebo-controlled trials. And when people were on a statin, it reduced the progression of their calcification by as
mm,
much as 77%. So sometimes it's not either or. Like if somebody has to go on a statin, it's like, well, what am I going to do around it so that I can maximize that they're on that, but I'm going to protect it, right? So obviously CoQ10, vitamin D, you got to look at carnitine, selenium, omega-3 fatty acids all get depleted by statins. So the bigger dose you take, the more at risk you are.
This aged garlic extract, what dose are we looking at?
2,400 milligrams a day. So
4,400
1,200 twice a
milligrams.
day. Yeah. Or, just 2,400 a day. 1,200 is the minimum, but there's multiple studies showing that it drops blood pressure, an average of 10 to 12 points systolic, 6 points diastolic. It's a, great comment. It's called a kyolic, Kyolic.
Okay.
It's the only, they've got 200, I mean, they've got like 6 to 10 published studies in tier one peer reviewed journals every year. So I don't think I I don't negate modern drugs. Look, I'm a clinical pharmacist, right? I mean, I believe in drug therapy, but I believe drug therapy is for people a lot of times. It's going to save their life. Don't forget about acute situations, but it's for people that don't want to change their life. It's like, hey, I don't want to do anything to reduce my blood pressure. All right, you need a blood pressure med. I don't want to do anything for my weight loss. Okay. You may need a GLP-1, and maybe you need a GLP-1 anyway for a period of time to get yourself retrained, whatever.
No, I love that you said that because this goes into the argument, the age-old argument that the government healthcare, they're trying to kill you. The doctors aren't trying to fix
Nah,
you. They're just trying. I'm like, listen, you have to understand. Number one, your doctor is not trained in nutrition. And I love that. I'm a registered dietitian. I'm trained in
yeah,
nutrition. You know what I'm
that's
not
right.
trained on is open heart surgery because we have to have these compartments. We have to do this because how much information do you want your doctor to be really good at? What your doctor is
Right.
really good at is acute, and what your doctor is really good at is fixing something as quickly as possible and efficiently as possible. And what your doctor knows is that if you come in, you have this array of health issues, you sit down, I'm like, hey, what do I need to do? Your doctor's like, okay, well, I need you to start getting to bed, pitch black room, cool room. I need you to try to get at least 8 hours, 7 to 8 hours. Excuse me. I need you to wake up, get some sunlight, 5 to 10 minutes in the morning. I need you to eat a high protein diet with a lot of micronutrients. I want you to eat the rainbow, and I don't mean Skittles. Roy G. Biv, red, orange. I want this to look
Yeah,
every day. I want you to hit these rainbows for your micronutrients.
right
I want
on.
you to resistance train 3 days a week. It's not happening. Why would your doctor waste time telling you these things you probably already know you should be doing anyway? You're not going to do it. So what happens to your doctor if your doctor sits there and tells you all these things? You're like, all right, cool, peace out, doc. You leave and have a heart attack. Like he can't do that. They're not going to waste the time. So they're going to give you
That's
something
it.
that's most likely going to prevent you from having a heart attack when you walk down the stairs to get to the parking lot. That is their job. It's the dietitian's job, and I'll put a lot of pressure on dietitians. I don't necessarily think they're giving the best information, but again, we have to give the information in the short window we have with you that's going to move the needle for your health. It's up to
Right on.
you to make the big changes. And people aren't wanting that. They're wanting to blame the doctor when it's like the doctor isn't force feeding you. The doctor isn't making you sedentary. Like we can't blame the doctors for a lack of information that one, they're not trained on anyway. They shouldn't be trained on. And two, you're
Yeah.
not going to listen to whatsoever. It's
Yeah.
asinine. And it's something I do in my practice a lot is I ask people to take out a pen and paper or do it remotely. If we're doing it remotely, I just tell them to make a mental note. I did this at a seminar this last weekend. Take out your notes and I want you to write down 5 to 10 things you know you're doing right now that are preventing you from your goal. Write your goal at top. Now make a list, 5 to 10 things you know are preventing you from that goal. Everyone comes up with a list. There might be some things that aren't big deals. They think they're a big
Yeah.
deal and they're not. Like
Right.
maybe they've been led astray by an influencer, but most people can come up with at least 5 solid things. And you know what? A
Oh
lot of
yeah.
times I'll say, hey, for 30 days, that's all you're doing. Stop doing those things because I'm not going to give you new information until you're ready to change the information you already know, until you're ready to make the changes you have
So
already
good.
accepted. You've
So
already
good, man.
accepted that these are standing in my way. You're not ready for the new information.
That's so good.
Yeah, because
It's interesting. I remember talking to this leading diabetes educator, and I said, "Well, what do you think the big drawback is?" And this plays into exactly what you said. He goes, "You know what? I spend 20 minutes with a diabetic, person with diabetes. I spend 20 minutes talking to them, trying to encourage them, educating them, trying to get them to understand they need to move, change their diet. And when they leave for the next 2 months, 29 days, 23 hours, and 40 minutes until our next appointment, he's not thinking about me. And I'm not thinking about him. I think what I'm so happy that that you brought this up because I've taught at medical school 18 years. I'm still on faculty at George Washington School of Medicine and Health Sciences. Medicine is good. We need both, but we can't expect somebody to know it all. Like you got in understanding diseases, like when do you have a disease? Hey, I just did this scan on you. This is bad. That's your docs. But trend analysis, for example, and that's what I spent my life in metabolic health is trend analysis on labs. If you have a 95 blood sugar, you have a 60% risk of being a person with diabetes in the next decade. That was a 6% risk for every point over 84. Now, if you look at the Japanese study that looked at that, it was 9% risk for every point over 90. And you start damaging your blood vessels when you're in your low 90s. We're not teaching that. Or if your potassium is below 4.5 consistently, 4 times the risk of being a diabetic, right? So looking at trends to say this is where you're going if you don't change, that's a different set of rules that also plays a valuable part in someone being well. Look, both my father and my brother were saved by the miracles of modern medicine. I will never say, oh, it's a conspiracy. They all want us sick. They saved my father and my brother's life. Forever grateful for that. But what they didn't do, well, my father had a Whipple surgery at age 79 because he was a 40-year diabetic, and diabetics get more gastrointestinal cancers. And so they do that huge surgery. For those of you who don't know what a Whipple is, they take the lower third of the stomach, all of your duodenum, and the top third of your pancreas off. People usually live like 2 to 4 years after that when they're in their 40s, 50s. He was 79 when that happened, but then he came to live with me. And I said, let me introduce you to the treadmill. And let me introduce you to our way of eating, because if you don't eat our way, there ain't gonna be no food in the fridge for you. He was a world famous chef, like one of the most decorated chefs in the world. All right. He lived 13 years longer by changing up those things, and the fact that he was in with a family that cared about him and loved him and got to be with his grandchild. And, a lot of those things I think create context as well. But I think we forget the healing power of the body when we make those decisions like you were making those people make. I think people forget how powerful your body can heal itself when you start to make the right decisions.
Yeah. And again, it's all designed to be that way. So when you break part of it down, it crashes. You don't break one part down without the rest of it. The wheel falls off the cart crashes. Like that's the
Right.
way it's going to work because it's all designed to work seamlessly. We've all like been to a grocery store where one wheel was broken. Nothing works the way it should. We're sitting here looking like an idiot, like moving around. Nothing works as it should. And all we had to do was fix that one. The rest looks dysfunction, then it's not. It's just the one wheel. If we could fix that one, by gosh, I could go shop the outside of the grocery store.
Yeah.
Um,
I always say to people, you're only as strong as your weakest organ.
I love that. And
Yeah.
a couple things I want to ask here is as we start, we could do 3 of these, but I do want to know what are some of the biggest health, because you work with a lot of practitioners, you've spoke to a lot of practitioners. What are some of the biggest health misconceptions that you have found in practitioners that practitioners have, and how would you have them change that for people? How would they correct that to tell people what to do?
Well, the first thing is stop putting the judgment on them. It's like you got to work as a partner to that person and understand that you're a team. And I think when people aren't scared of coming back and they've fallen a little short, but they're trying, we got to embrace that and try to pick them up and get them better. Because so I think that's a big one. I think the other one is they minimize nutrition. Like even if they're into it, they hand you a one pager or a two pager and hey, yeah, eat this way. They minimize the importance of it. And then I think the biggest thing that I talk about to practitioners is you have to be ruthlessly compassionate.
Mm,
And what I mean about that is you have to convince that person it's time to change. So it's that commitment to not just say, oh, well, they're probably not going to change here, out the door, see you in a couple months, right? It's that commitment to say, I, I am going to find a way to get the information across to that person. And those are the things that I think if they could do that, then any information you or I give to help them like manage a person becomes easy because now they've got a roadmap to opening that person up, being committed to getting the person on, being 100% present, be 100% present in that engagement that you're in so that you really can, impact their life. That's probably the biggest thing. And then after that, it's, being lazy, like I don't want to say lazy, but for example, blood sugars in the 90s. People should be getting the riot act read to them once their blood sugars are in the 90s. When their A1C is 5.6, barely almost over the edge, and the fasting insulin's 10. You got to be telling them, oh, so you want to be blind? You want to have a higher risk of amputation? You feel like being one of those people walking into the dialysis center 3 times a week? Oh, okay, I got you.
yeah. No, that's a
Yeah.
big one. And I
So
do, go ahead, go ahead.
no, that's it. I mean, those are some of the things, right?
Yeah, and I do think a lot of it when you're looking at, say, blood work, for instance. I've had many people come to me, and first off, I'm a registered dietitian. I understand the scope of practice with that. I do.
Sure,
So
of
I'll never
course, of
I'll never
course.
take someone's blood work by itself and be like, well, your doctor was wrong. I'm like, hey, can I
No,
speak? Can I
right.
speak with your doctor? Can we set up a meeting? Because a lot of times, and again, it's just the system. Doctors got to get you in, get you out, get the next one. If they don't, then that person's going to be the one in the waiting room complaining and filing a complaint.
Uh,
And all this, they're limited on time, but it's very common for them to look at blood labs and just compare it to this is the standard, this is the normal level. Cool, we're fine. They don't really have the time a lot of times. I do believe that, but sometimes, and that's a whole other issue, an administrative issue. But a lot of times the
yes.
blood work can really start to show a roadmap. And like maybe this is slightly elevated and it's not a big deal, But if we look at this and compare it to this, we can start to paint a little bit of a different picture. And that's where me working at a more concierge fashion that I do, and people like yourself, is I can look at that and start to create a story with your blood work. And then
Absolutely.
as we change things and we see the story change a little bit, I'm like, okay, let's look at this. And I'm curious, what would you say? Because I don't think enough people get blood work done by their own volition. Like the doctor will order blood work. And if they do, cool. If they don't see their doctor for 2 more years, guess what? They're not getting blood work for 2 years. I think
That's
everyone,
right.
if you have the financial means, should be getting regular blood work.
Oh,
Absolutely
without a
every
doubt.
single person. So for the average Joe and Jane, what are the blood markers you would suggest you need to be getting this every year, if not more? Maybe you think it should be twice a year, 3 times a year, quarterly, whatever. What
Yeah.
are those blood markers everyone should be getting and studying and paying attention to?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's really important people get their blood test done. I mean, I like it twice a year if they can, but once a year I'll take. I wrote a book called Your Blood Never Lies, and it was a book that kind of goes through and explains blood markers to people for consumers so they understand trends. So obviously, insulin and glucose are important. Cortisol in the morning, you got to do it before 9 a.m., but cortisol important. Get your sex hormones done. Get all your thyroid hormones done, meaning, there's a family of thyroid hormones that you should get done. I like people getting an advanced lipid panel because it tells me more about what's going on with their lipids than just HDL, LDL, total cholesterol, and triglycerides. Um, I, I mean, CBC and CMP mean a complete blood count and then a comprehensive metabolic profile. Really important because you pick up things like B12 anemias, iron anemias, how my kidneys functioning, how's my liver functioning, homocysteine and C-reactive protein, because those are markers that relate to, potential risk for dementia and heart disease and kidney disease. So, and those are easy markers to get. Every doctor can measure those. And then when you start getting past those, I mean, I love a red blood cell magnesium because I find most people are at least somewhat low or less than ideal on their mag. Um, so those are some of the key ones. And then if I go past that, then there's all kinds of good stuff you can measure, right? But if you did that, you at least have a decent idea of, where am I at?
Okay. And if you're someone, maybe you have a little bit more income that you want to spend, like, listen, I'm checking all these boxes. I'm moving first downs like these guys said. What are the blood panels that perhaps they're not going to get on the standard that maybe they should perhaps look into that they wouldn't have thought of before?
Yeah, so I mean, I think like you could get things like a adiponectin, which is a marker of oxidative stress and how well most likely your insulin receptors are working. Galectin 3 is a big marker you can get at a standard lab that talks about it. It's kind of relates to heart disease, it relates to diabetes, and it relates to dementia risk. So the higher the galectin 3, the more the risk. And then you get into, I love the new mitochondrial screen that's out, the me screen that's out, because it's actually validated to punch biopsy. So it's not a estimate or a guess of mitochondrial function. It's measuring how your mitochondria are functioning. And that's a finger stick, and that's good. And I love food allergy tests, a good food allergy and sensitivity test that includes IgG, IgE, IgG4, C3BD. Like there's different categories of food sensitivities. We miss that a lot with folks. And then if they want to explore, do I have toxic metals? Do an environmental burden? Those are the things I lean into all the time. And obviously, add more trace nutrients to find out, hey, where's your zinc at? Where's your folate at? Where's your CoQ10 at? Those types of things.
Okay, no, I love that. And the last thing here, we have someone, they've come into us. We're going to pretend that we're in this doctor's office. We have limited time. We can only tell them the things that we know they're most likely to change when they get home. Too much information, it goes out the window.
Oh,
What are the
absolutely.
what are the small pieces of information that you could tell someone right now, maybe 3 or 5 things? This is what you need to either do or look into. If you think you're listening to this and you think you may be metabolically broken, like you've done a lot of things to fix yourself and you're just not right, what are the things that they could start doing now to move forward and see if it is a metabolic issue?
I mean, obviously, if you go in and you see glucose and insulin off, that's number one. So, how about trying eating on a 12-12 schedule, right? Breakfast, lunch, dinner. Don't eat after 7 p.m. That's not radical. I'm not talking about 16-8 eating, which most people fail at. And even when they don't fail at it, it messes up their labs, most of the time. Uh, so just start with a proper eating schedule. Start with hydration. In general, people eat too much too often. They eat too late and they pick the wrong foods. So can they improve their eating schedule? Can they add fiber to their diet? Because nobody's getting enough fiber. And people love it when they get a good poop. Bottom line, man. I start dropping a good poop. They're so happy with you, man. It's like, I'm never going to anybody else.
Yep.
Um, and I think, hydrating super important. It's something another one that people don't do. And then after that, like what I usually do is find out where their weak spot is. Like, what are they really concerned about? Are they concerned about their stress eating? Are they concerned about, hey, I'm gassy, I'm bloated? Or, where is their concern? And try to pick something that's easy to fix so that I can win them over. And that becomes more individual, right? But that's kind of how I approach it.
I like that. So obviously there's going to be people listening that say, hey, this guy is not like my pharmacist or my doctor or even nutritionist. Where can people find you? What resources do you have available that people can reach out to you to either learn some things that you've put out there or potentially even hire you to look more in depth?
Yeah, so the real Jim LaValle on Instagram's an easy way. I've got all kinds of stuff posted there. Lots of studies, lots of commentary. My books are available if you just search Jim LaValle. Obviously, I'm a chief science officer at Lifetime. Um, and then my clinic in Austin, Texas, LaValle Performance Health Center. It's an easy way to go. But apparently, I mean, I never even realized how much stuff was on the internet about me or my record or my past lectures because I'm technically challenged too. I never even knew I was on the internet until I put my name in the search bar, and I was like, "Holy crap! There's all
That can be
this
a good or
stuff."
bad thing though. So
Yeah,
fortunately for you, it's a lot of
I
good
looked
stuff.
through. No. I looked through. It was all good, so I was super happy about that. But I think there's lots of resources. If they go to the real Jim LaValle, it's a good start.
Awesome, man. I appreciate it. And we'll wrap this up, but we could do 10 of these. I feel like we could break one down only on nutrition, only on sleep, probably one only on sex and the importance of it. But this has been awesome because I do think we've given a lot of information that people can just watch this on their commute to and from work and immediately go home and start making some changes they wouldn't have otherwise. And that's really the goal because too much information is not usable. And all of this is very basic, usable information that can literally add life to years and hopefully years to life.
100%, man. I had so much fun with you. I could talk with you like, into tomorrow and then get on that deer stand with you, man.
Hey, well, we can make that happen too. Just say the word.
All right. All right.
So man,
Very
thank you
good.
for your time. Thank you for your time so much. And we'll have you back on without a doubt.
Great, man. Appreciate you.
I want to thank you guys for watching and also a word of thanks to our sponsors who have made this episode possible. All I ask is that you guys please hit the like and subscribe button as it helps the podcast grow and so we can continue to bring on some great guests for you guys. I'll see you in the next one.